Okay, next up on soil is going to be 2.4.3, which is going to be uh, soil management and specific profiles. Soil management and specific profiles. All right, so soil management, this is where it comes to what can we do, kind of like what we talked about in the lithosphere when we talked about what can we do to stop mass movement from happening. A lot of the same things can be applied to soil to stop it from deteriorating. How can we effectively do agriculture, which is necessary for society as we know it? What can we do with agriculture and soil to protect it from deteriorating and becoming basically deserted. It would be called desertification if it goes into becoming non-viable. So methods have been used to combat erosion of soils. We've learned a lot from past events, and we've learned a lot of great techniques. These management strategies are put in place to sustain and restore fertility, increase economic benefits, and crop yield. Fortunately, it looks like my image for cover crops is gone, and I'll try to get a new one up there. But cover crops are crops, this is the first thing, that are planted alongside. So you'll have like a row of crops, right? Oops. You'll have a row of crops and another row and another row. I'm sorry, I'm moving all around here. You'll have row upon row upon row of crops. Then what you can do with a cover crop, though, is in between those rows, instead of planting another of the same crop, which is going to have the same root length, which is going to take the water from the same level and all the nutrients from the same level, you can actually put cover crops in there to cover the soil, less exposure, and also these cover crops can be there to provide nutrients back into the soil that the other crops need. A cover crop will be planted in the field with the target crop and may be plowed underneath the ground to provide nutrients to the crops surrounding it. Oftentimes the cover crops are legumes, which are beans, basically your beans and your peas, because these are nitrogen fixers, which take nitrogen from the air and actually fix it into a form that the plants can then use. It's really awesome. Cover crops also improve the amount of organic matter in the soil by replacing what would just be empty space of dirt with vegetation. They decrease soil erosion and improve water retention by covering up exposed soil and providing a way for water to trickle down through the soil and then get to the other crops. Crop rotation. Crop rotation. So, a crop is like, okay, I'm going to plant a field of wheat, right? All of the wheat is going to take the nutrients and the water from the same level. So that area at the end of the season will probably be depleted. So what farmers can do is they can rotate where they plant each crop every year. Season 1, all right, it's in spot A. But then the next season, the next year, plant it in spot B, then spot C, then spot D, and change the crops that you are putting into different places because they're going to have different root lengths and take different nutrients from the ground, thus less depletion and more giving back the nutrients that were needed for that. All right. Also, pests and diseases tend to foster if one crop isn't up in the area for too long, and so you'll end up confusing the pests if they don't come, if they, the next season they go back and they've gotten used to where this crop is. If you keep the same crop in the same place every year, those pests are going to know what's going to be there. So by confusing them, that's better pest management. Nutrient management is the practice of not over-fertilizing plants. The farmer studies the amount of nutrient his or her crops needs and tests the soil to determine the amount of fertilizer to spread. Too much fertilizer can result in runoff of fertilizer, which can have a negative effect on the surrounding water bodies. And not enough nutrient will cause the crops not to grow, lose soils, and then erosion. By practicing nutrient management, farmers can optimize their crop management. These are usually going to be for non-native crops, and that's most of what happens now is that American farmland, where the rich soils were, that's where civilization kind of started in America. Let's just take America, for example. That's where civilization started, and we started developing more and more and more and get less and less and less of that fertile land. So where most of our cropland in America is where? Out in the Midwest, where the soils aren't great for growing things. So we're going to have to add nutrients, and we're going to have to add water, which we'll talk about in the hydrosphere unit. And we'll talk about in just a second as well. Tillage management. Tillage is agitation of the soil after harvesting. This is usually done because you need to get air from up top into the dirt. So you will till it up, and these are those big rotating things if you've ever seen a farm or videos of a farm, the tilling of the farm. So there can be actually no-till methods that can aerate the soil without tillage, and methods that decrease the amount of tillage are recommended for soil health. So less digging up the dirt, more poking holes in the dirt is better. Soil, sorry. Water management. Water is a big thing, especially in Florida, not Florida, the Midwest. There are places where it naturally rains enough to grow crops, and it rains the right amount, but there are going to be places where you have to add water in order for things to grow. And it used to be that they would flood the land with water, just like push water out there. That would cause a lot of erosion. That wasn't good, all right? They now use sprinklers, and you can see the large circle center pivot sprinklers, and those are good, but they still put probably too much water than what you need out there. The best thing you can do is this kind of drip irrigation that you see up here. You can see it just comes from a normal hose, basically, and you have little holes in the hose at each plant that you're going to water. Therefore, you're only watering that one plant. You can do it with a way less amount of water. So drip irrigation is really, really great. Shelter belts. Shelter belts are going to be lines of planted trees that are planted around crop areas to cut wind erosion. So basically this would be like, oh, there's a farm, I'm going to plant a row of trees because a lot of wind's coming up here and blowing away all of my dirt or my soil. So a shelter belt would be like a belt of trees that's preventing the wind erosion. And finally, contour farming are crops that are planted on the slope of a land, all right? And the contour of the land is basically, if you were to drop water down, it's how the water would flow. So instead of going straight up and down or side by side on the hill or the mountain, you plant with the contour. So instead of the water coming against it, it flows with that, and that will cause way less erosion. I do want you to look at these specific profiles that you need to know and understand about the diversity of soils. These probably are going to be on your exam. You do need to read about each. Make sure you've done that. You might want to write down the differences between the profiles. I'm not going to go through them here, but I do need you guys to go and do that. So make sure you do that. It may come up on the exam. Just know that poor growing, if you see temperate podzels, that's poor growing, and brown earths are good growing. Different types of soils that have different things in them. So please go read on those.